I wasn't afraid of failure. I was afraid of being seen while failing. What if the real breakthrough isn't about getting it right, but about showing up anyway? Stay with me because what I learned might just change how you show up in your own life. There was a moment when I had to decide: hide behind silence or speak with a shaking voice. That choice changed everything. What I discovered on the other side wasn't perfection. It was something far more powerful. Ready to find out what that is? If you're ready to show up as you are, like and subscribe. Let's take this journey together. I used to think confidence meant having all the answers, that when you walked into a room, your shoulders had to be squared, your voice unwavering, your presence commanding, like the people you see in leadership conferences or on glossy magazine covers. I thought confidence was something loud, something undeniable. But now I know the truth. Real confidence is often quiet. It's showing up when every part of you wants to disappear. It's whispering yes to life even when your hands tremble. It's standing still when your instinct is to run and shrink and hide. I wasn't afraid of failure. I was afraid of being seen while failing. And that fear, I've learned, is more common than we admit. We say we lack confidence, but what we really lack is permission. Permission to be human, permission to try, permission to be visible before we feel perfect. For most of my life, I played it safe. I sat in the back of the classroom even when I knew the answer. I didn't raise my hand unless I was sure it was right. In meetings at work, I rehearsed what I might say in my head 20 times over and still said nothing. I wanted to be excellent, but more than that, I wanted to be invisible. Because being excellent while invisible meant I wouldn't risk judgment. I wouldn't risk exposure. I wouldn't risk the awful, vulnerable weight of being truly seen. But here's the twist no one tells you. When you spend your life trying to avoid being seen, you start to disappear even to yourself. You wake up one day and realize you don't recognize the person in the mirror. Not because they've changed, but because you've never actually let them show up in the first place. Confidence isn't something you finally deserve once you've become someone. It's something you claim while you're still unsure, still imperfect, still in process. And that was my breakthrough. Not a sudden surge of self-love or a life-changing moment on a mountaintop. It was smaller than that, quieter. It was the moment I let someone hear my voice even though it shook. The moment I let my name be called and didn't pretend I wasn't there. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt terrifying. But that's how breakthroughs often arrive. Not as fireworks, but as small flickers of courage in the dark. In 2021, a study from the American Psychological Association found that over 70% of adults reported experiencing imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. That number isn't surprising if you've ever felt like you had to overperform just to feel allowed in the room. What we call a lack of confidence is often a learned invisibility, a deeply conditioned belief that our worth is still on trial. We grow up internalizing the idea that visibility must be earned, that unless we're the smartest, the most talented, the most attractive, we haven't qualified to take up space. It starts young. In school, we're praised not for speaking up, but for getting it right. In families, we're told to be modest, to be careful not to seem full of ourselves. On social media, we see a polished, curated version of what confidence is supposed to look like: charisma, certainty, performance. But beneath that, many of us are quietly performing a different role, the role of the person who stays small, agreeable, safe. Psychologist Carl Rogers once said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." But how do you accept yourself when every message around you has taught you to doubt your enoughness? When even being seen feels like a risk? Social theorists like Irving Goffman spoke of the presentation of self in everyday life, how we wear masks, craft identities, and perform roles based on what we think others expect. This isn't deception, it's survival, especially for women, for people of color, for LGBTQ+ individuals, for anyone whose very existence has ever been questioned or judged. The safest choice often becomes: stay small, blend in, don't draw attention. But here's where the damage creeps in. When you live in a state of constant performance, there's no room for connection. No room for authenticity. You can't truly be loved if you've never truly been seen. And you can't truly be seen if you've spent your whole life trying not to be. Confidence isn't just about believing in yourself. It's about undoing the quiet programming that tells you you're not ready yet, that you haven't earned it yet, that you need to wait just a little longer, just until you're better, just until you're perfect. But perfection is a moving target. You'll never arrive if you're always waiting for the day you're finally enough. And that's the cost we rarely calculate. Not just the opportunities missed, but the identity lost. The version of you that never got to exist. Not because you weren't capable, but because you didn't feel visible. When I finally admitted to myself that I felt invisible, I did what most people do. I tried to fix it from the outside in. I thought, maybe if I look more polished, if I speak more eloquently, if I'm charming and funny and effortless, then I'll finally feel confident. So I started crafting a version of myself that would be harder to ignore. I read all the self-help books. I practiced power poses in the mirror. I studied the confident people in my life like a blueprint and tried to imitate them. I bought the clothes they wore, mimicked their tone, mirrored their confidence. I thought if I could just perform it well enough, maybe it would eventually feel real. But it didn't. Because performative confidence isn't confidence. It's armor. And the longer you wear it, the heavier it becomes. The toxic solution we adopt is this. We try to become someone else. We chase an idealized version of ourselves that looks better, speaks better, shines brighter. We think confidence is something we construct, like a costume we can step into. We chase the applause instead of the alignment, the image instead of the integrity. And it works. For a little while, people respond to the version you project. They praise your poise, your eloquence, your control. But deep down, you know you're still hiding. You know you're just a few cracks away from collapse. You've built something impressive, but not something real. And real confidence, honest, grounded, embodied confidence, can't grow in the soil of pretense. There's a reason we're drawn to people who are a little messy, a little vulnerable, a little imperfect. It's because they're real. They don't feel like they're trying to win us. They feel like they're willing to be with us. And that's what performative confidence lacks: presence. The other problem with this false solution is that it's never enough. You're always a step behind your own image. You feel like a fraud, not because you are one, but because you've outsourced your worth to how well you play the part. You can't relax because the act never stops. And eventually, even the admiration becomes empty. Because you know it's not really for you. It's for the version of you that you created to survive. I didn't realize I was burning out, not from doing too much, but from being someone too much. I was exhausted from the effort of existing as an edited version of myself. And no amount of external success can make up for the internal ache of being unseen, even by yourself. Everything shifted the day I stopped asking, "How do I look?" and started asking, "Am I here?" Because that's what I had been avoiding. Not just being seen, but being present. Not just being noticed, but being known. Confidence, I realized, wasn't about projecting an image. It was about embodying a truth. That truth was this: I am already here. I didn't need to earn my way into the room. I didn't need to justify my voice, my presence, my ideas. I was already here. My breakthrough wasn't loud. It was a quiet realization, almost like a whisper. You're allowed to be seen before you feel ready. You're allowed to exist before you feel perfect. You don't need to wait for a better version of yourself to show up before you do. That idea changed everything for me. Confidence is self-permission. Not the kind you wait for from others, but the kind you grant yourself. The moment you stop treating yourself like an imposter in your own life and start showing up as you are, that moment might not feel magical. It might feel terrifying. But it is the seed of everything real. We talk a lot about self-confidence, as if it's a personality trait. But what if it's a relationship? What if confidence is really about fidelity to yourself? About choosing not to abandon yourself when things get hard? About not editing who you are to make other people more comfortable? The term self-fidelity came to me one night while journaling, and it unlocked something deep. fidelity, loyalty, faithfulness, the act of staying true. That's what I'd been missing. I had mastered the art of adjusting, of adapting, of reading the room. But I had lost the practice of returning to myself, of remembering, what do I think? What do I feel? What do I need? So I started small. I began saying what I meant, even if my voice cracked. I stopped pretending I was okay when I wasn't. I let myself take up space at the dinner table. I let silence stretch longer before filling it. I let my ideas be unfinished and my questions be asked out loud. And to my surprise, the world didn't collapse. No one turned away in horror. In fact, something unexpected happened. I started to connect, not just with others, but with myself. I started to feel grounded, not because everything was perfect, but because I was present in it. That's when I knew I had stumbled into something more sustainable than performance. I had found presence. And presence, I believe, is the birthplace of real confidence. The kind that can stand still. The kind that can say, I'm here without apology. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real, but becomes magnetic because it is. When we picture a confident person, the image is almost always the same. Someone walking into a room with ease, someone who never stumbles over their words, someone with a firm handshake, steady eye contact, a magnetic voice. Maybe they're leading the conversation, laughing loudly, dressed impeccably. That's the stereotype we've been sold, a curated performance of certainty, polish, and control. We assume that confidence looks like extroversion, sounds like certainty, and feels like power. But that's not what it actually is. I've met people who fit that image perfectly, who command attention, speak without hesitation, always seem put together. And yet, in quiet moments, some of them have admitted they feel like they're faking it, that it's all a front, that they're terrified of being exposed as unsure or ordinary or not nearly as put together as they seem, because you can wear confidence like a costume and still be hiding underneath it. And I've met others, softer spoken, sometimes awkward, hesitant even, who exude a different kind of confidence. The kind that doesn't try to impress you, the kind that listens deeply, asks curious questions, holds their own truth even when it's unpopular, the kind that says, I know who I am. I'm okay being misunderstood. That is confidence too. But you rarely see that version on magazine covers or viral TED Talks, because it's not loud, it's not flashy, it doesn't beg to be seen. It just is. Social media has only deepened the gap between the stereotype and the reality. Online, confidence is filtered, scripted, rehearsed. We scroll through people's best takes, edited captions, picture-perfect lives, and we start to believe that confidence is synonymous with perfection. That if we don't look like that, sound like that, perform like that, we must not have it. But real confidence doesn't require proof. It doesn't need a million likes or a round of applause. Real confidence is quiet conviction. It's the ability to stand in your truth, even when no one claps for it, even when you're the only one who sees it. And most importantly, real confidence is flexible. It allows room for mistakes, for awkwardness, for growth. It doesn't collapse when you forget your words or stumble through a sentence. It says, I'm still here. I'm still enough. The stereotype tells us that confident people never doubt themselves. The reality is that confident people doubt themselves all the time. They just don't let that doubt silence them. They've learned how to carry uncertainty without disappearing, and that is what separates the performance from the presence. There was a Tuesday afternoon that I'll never forget. I was sitting in the back row of a small community center in Portland, Oregon, clutching the printed agenda for a local panel I'd been invited to join. It was supposed to be informal, a circle of voices talking about creative work and identity. But to me, it felt like a courtroom. My heart was racing. My palms were slick with sweat. My name tag stared up at me like a dare. I had said yes when they asked me to be on the panel. I had convinced myself it would be good practice, that I was ready, that this was my moment to be seen. But now that I was there, surrounded by people who looked so confident, so composed, I wanted nothing more than to slide out of my chair and disappear. I told myself I had nothing to say, that I didn't belong, that they had made a mistake inviting me. And then, without warning, the moderator said my name. It wasn't a question, it was an invitation. I don't remember exactly what I said that day. I remember my voice shaking, my words tangling, my cheeks burning. I remember the silence in the room after I finished, this long, unbearable pause that felt like confirmation of all my worst fears. I was sure I had embarrassed myself, that everyone could see through me. But then someone across the circle smiled and nodded, and someone else leaned forward. And then, quietly, another panelist said, "That's exactly how I've felt too." It wasn't what I said that mattered. It was that I said it. That moment changed me. Not because I performed well, but because I showed up anyway. Because I let myself be seen without armor. Because I let my voice out into a space where it might not be accepted. And instead of rejection, I found resonance. That's when I learned that confidence isn't about proving yourself. It's about revealing yourself. It's about trusting that your presence matters. Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. Since that day, I've spoken on bigger stages, in front of larger crowds. But no moment has meant more to me than that small, quiet afternoon in Portland, because it was the first time I chose to stop waiting and start existing in the open. It didn't make me fearless, but it made me real. And from that day on, I promised myself, I would rather be seen shaking than stay hidden pretending to be still. The most powerful thing I've learned is this: you don't become confident by waiting until you feel ready. You become confident by showing up when you're not. Confidence doesn't precede action. It's built through it. Every time you speak up when your voice shakes, every time you choose presence over performance, you are teaching yourself that you are allowed to exist in full view. That's the real work. Not becoming someone else, but returning to yourself again and again with kindness. And here's where the concept of self-fidelity becomes more than just an idea. It becomes a practice. It's a commitment to keep choosing yourself in small, quiet ways, not in grand gestures or dramatic reinventions, but in the everyday moments where you could disappear and choose not to. It's telling the truth when someone asks how you're doing, even if it's uncomfortable. It's staying at the table when you feel the urge to shrink. It's signing your name at the bottom of an email without apology. It's saying, "I don't know, but I'll find out." It's resisting the urge to over-explain, to over-edit, to overcompensate. Sometimes it looks like speaking. Sometimes it looks like silence. But the difference is that you are choosing it from within, not reacting out of fear. One of the most grounding practices I adopted was what I now call the presence pause. Before any interaction that triggers my old instinct to hide, I take one deep breath and ask myself, can I let who I am be enough right now? That single question, repeated over time, has softened my armor. It reminds me that confidence isn't an act, it's an alignment, a remembering. I also started doing what I call visibility reps, small daily acts of showing up honestly, sharing an opinion in a group chat, posting something unpolished, raising my hand first in a meeting. These weren't meant to impress anyone. They were meant to remind me that I could survive being seen, that I didn't need to curate my every interaction to be worthy of connection. And over time, something shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it stopped steering the car. I stopped needing every moment to go perfectly. I started trusting that I could handle the awkwardness, the missteps, the learning curve, that I didn't need to be invincible to be valuable. Self-fidelity isn't a one-time decision. It's a way of living, a way of walking into each day and saying, I'm not going to abandon myself. Not when I stumble, not when I'm misunderstood, not when I feel exposed. Especially not then, because that's when confidence is built. Not in the light, but in the choice to keep standing in the dark. Have you ever hidden your true self to feel safe? Share your moment below. I read every comment, and you're not alone in this. Even after everything I'd learned, even after the panel in Portland, the visibility reps, the self-fidelity, I still had days where I felt like disappearing. That's the part people don't talk about enough. The persistence of the internal resistance. Just because you've chosen to be seen once doesn't mean it gets easy. The deeper fear remains, this quiet whisper that says, if they really see you, they won't love you. If you show up fully, you might lose everything. This is the universal obstacle, the fear that visibility will cost us belonging. We're wired for connection. From the moment we're born, we learn that approval equals safety. As children, we adapt quickly, smile when they like it, stay quiet when they frown, get praised when we please. We build our sense of identity around what is accepted and applauded, and over time, we confuse survival strategies with personality traits. So even as adults, we carry that same wiring. We think, if I don't play the part, I'll be rejected. And rejection doesn't feel intellectual. It feels existential. It feels like exile, like being cast out from the tribe. That fear doesn't always sound dramatic. Sometimes it sounds like hesitation, like second guessing, like rereading a text 5 times before hitting send, like rewriting a caption until the voice in it is no longer yours, like declining an opportunity because the timing isn't right, when what you really mean is, I don't feel worthy yet. The truth is, stepping into confidence requires grieving the version of you that kept you safe, the one who was quiet in the meeting, who dimmed their light so no one would feel threatened, who said yes when they meant no. That version of you did their job. They got you here, but they can't take you further. Letting them go doesn't mean betraying yourself. It means honoring your growth. It means realizing that hiding is no longer survival. It's self-abandonment. The hardest part isn't the outside world. It's the inner negotiation, the tug of war between who you've been and who you're becoming, between comfort and courage, between safety and aliveness. And no one else can resolve that for you. No affirmation or podcast or self-help book can make that choice. You have to make it again and again, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when the old fear says, don't say that, and something deeper inside you says, say it anyway. That's the edge where real confidence lives. Not in certainty, but in self-trust. Not in being unshakable, but in choosing not to disappear, even when part of you still wants to. Confidence isn't just about how you show up in front of a crowd. It's about how you show up in front of the people you love. In fact, the most vulnerable, most revealing form of confidence often appears in our closest relationships. Because it's one thing to speak on a stage. It's another to tell your partner what you actually need, to ask a friend for help without dressing it up as a joke, to say, that hurt me, without fearing you'll seem too sensitive. For years, I prided myself on being easy to be with, low maintenance, chill. I wore my adaptability like a badge of honor. I was the good listener, the reliable friend, the one who never made things complicated. But underneath that was a quiet pattern of self-erasure. I didn't say what I wanted because I didn't want to seem demanding. I didn't express discomfort because I feared being labeled dramatic. I confused emotional invisibility with emotional maturity. And I thought that made me good at relationships. But really, it made me absent from them. Because if you're not fully present in the relationship, if your needs are silenced, your voice softened to avoid tension, then the connection isn't mutual. It's managed. And the saddest part is, you end up resenting the very people you wanted to stay close to. Not because they did something wrong, but because they didn't know you were disappearing. That was the hardest lesson for me. When you don't let yourself be seen, you deny others the chance to truly love you. You give them a version of yourself they can't fully touch. And then you wonder why you still feel alone. Confidence in relationships looks like emotional honesty. It looks like saying, I felt overlooked, without a performance. It looks like allowing silence to hang in the air after a hard truth. It looks like trusting that the people who care about you can handle the real you, even the messy, uncertain, awkward parts. One of the most intimate things we can offer is our inner world. Not polished, not perfected, just real. And it takes courage. It takes the willingness to risk misunderstanding. But without that risk, there's no intimacy, only performance. The truth is, the most confident relationships aren't the ones without conflict. They're the ones where both people are allowed to show up fully, to be heard, to be challenged, to be changed. When I began letting myself be seen in my relationships, something shifted. Not instantly, but gradually. Conversations deepened. Silences felt safer. Love felt less like approval and more like presence. And that's what we're all really longing for. Not perfection, not performance, but presence. The kind that says, I see you, I'm not going anywhere. So here's what I want to invite you to do. Not tomorrow, not when you feel more ready, but now. I want you to choose one small moment today to be seen. Just one. Not a grand gesture, not a reinvention. A moment of truth, a moment of presence, a moment where you step out from behind the version of you that's always trying to get it right. Maybe it's saying no when you usually say yes. Maybe it's leaving your camera on during a Zoom meeting instead of hiding behind a profile picture. Maybe it's wearing the thing you love, but always talk yourself out of. Maybe it's texting someone, I need support, without apologizing for it. Maybe it's letting your full laugh out at the dinner table instead of stifling it because it feels too much. The moment doesn't have to be big. It just has to be honest. That's where the rewiring begins. That's where self-trust starts to take root. Not in your best days, but in the ones where you show up anyway. And here's the deeper practice. Stop asking for permission. Not in a defiant, dramatic way. In a quiet, grounded way. A way that says, I belong to myself now. Start noticing how often you look outside of yourself for approval. Before you speak, before you post, before you make a decision. And when you catch yourself doing it, gently bring your focus back home. You don't need to be louder, you need to be truer. You don't need to pretend you're fearless. You just need to move with the fear, instead of letting it steer. Every time you choose self-fidelity, every time you resist the urge to shrink, to edit, to perform, you reclaim a piece of your voice, a piece of your life. That's the real transformation. Not becoming someone you're proud of, but remembering you already are. Beneath the hesitation, the self-doubt, the years of disappearing, there is a steady, quiet knowing. I'm allowed to be here. Let that knowing guide your next decision. Let it sit in the room with you. Let it speak when you want to hide. Let it become a rhythm, a reflex, a way of being. And then watch what happens, not to how others see you, but to how you see yourself. Watch how the fear softens. Watch how the ground steadies. Watch how the space around you begins to feel more like home. Confidence isn't a final destination. It's a daily return. A return to your voice, your presence, your truth. And it starts now. Something happens when you stop performing and start participating. The world doesn't just change around you, it changes for you. People begin to respond to a different energy. Not because you're louder, but because you're more there. You're rooted, present, aligned. And that alignment creates a ripple, one that starts to reach every part of your life. You begin to make choices from the inside out. You say yes only when you mean it. You speak, not to impress, but to connect. You walk into rooms and stop asking, do I belong here? And start asking, what can I offer here? You no longer wait for the perfect moment to be brave. You trust that showing up in your imperfection is already brave enough. And slowly, you begin to feel something unfamiliar, but deeply grounding. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from escaping discomfort, but the kind that comes from knowing you're not hiding anymore. You're not erasing yourself to be liked. You're not shrinking to stay safe. You're living inside your life fully, even when it's awkward, even when it's messy. And in that kind of living, confidence isn't the goal, it's the byproduct. The breakthrough isn't that you stop being afraid, it's that you stopped letting fear decide who you are. So now, the question becomes, if you no longer had to earn your right to be seen, if you no longer believed that your presence had to be perfect to be powerful, who would you allow yourself to be? Who's the version of you that's been waiting, not to be built, but to be revealed? Because maybe confidence isn't about becoming someone else. Maybe it's about returning to someone you were never supposed to leave. If this spoke to you, like, subscribe and share with someone who needs to hear this today.